Okay, a little personal background. Let me give you an abbreviated, this is an abbreviated version of a little bit of my story. To make a long story short, in 1993, when I was 15 years old at a summer camp, God called me to be a youth pastor. I'm making a long story short. From the moment that happened, when I was 15, not a day went by, and this is the truth, not a day went by in my life when I did not think about that word from God, I guess you call it. And to have that experience as a 15-year-old, looking back on it now as an adult, is kind of crazy. But not a day went by that I didn't think about that and wrestle with what it might look like one day for me. I became very involved in the youth group that I was in. I grew up in a non-denominational, kind of Baptist-y church, although we weren't technically Baptist, theologically Baptist. But I was very involved as a student leader in my own youth group. I graduated from high school, went to college at Seattle Pacific University, where I met Lexi. And we started attending a Presbyterian church there called Bethany Presbyterian Church on Queen Anne. I started volunteering, Lexi and I both started volunteering in the high school youth group in the fall of 2001 when I was 22 years old and still had a lot of growing up to do. But we were dream volunteers. Speaking as somebody who has volunteers now, Lexi and I were dream volunteer leaders. We were very consistent in our help with what we did. We didn't have any kids yet, so we could do anything, anytime, you know. But I was a youth group leader, small group leader, went on all the events, all the trips, all the retreats. I would speak at the events, speak at youth groups, speak at the retreats. I worked on the youth house. We had a youth house where our youth group met. I would work on that because I'm handy, as you know. I would help set things up. I would help clean things up. I mean, there all the time. And it really had become my life, volunteering. And I didn't get paid, right? I was just a volunteer to help out. So I became the interim high school director there at Bethany Presbyterian in 2004, and then decided to attend Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena and get a Master's of Divinity. And officially, to me, that was the official launch into this call that God gave me when I was 15 to go to Fuller. So we moved to Pasadena when Scout was 2 months old, it's a whole other story, chapter of our lives. And I dove into academia. I chose Fuller because I wanted to become equipped for a long-term career in youth ministry. I didn't see this and have never seen this role as a springboard to become a senior pastor or a lead pastor or anything like that. And Fuller had an add-on concentration to the Masters of Divinity called Youth, Family, and Culture. And I thought that sounded fantastic. Also, on the faculty at the time, I forgot to record. Oh no, it's recording. On faculty at the time was a fellow named Chap Clark, who was a leading scholar in youth ministry stuff and still is very renowned in the field. Any Chap Clark fans out there? Hey, nope. Oh, damn. He was like a celebrity to me. I knew him before I went. During my time at Fuller, Chap became a mentor to me. I got to know him really well, and I got the education that I had hoped for. And in addition to the whole MDiv and all the courses that the MDiv included, I studied practical theology, philosophy, leadership, spiritual formation, culture, communication, all these other things that were all within the context of that youth, family, and culture concentration. I did an internship, a chaplaincy internship at Arcadia Methodist Hospital, because I was also on the path to become ordained in the Presbyterian Church. I did a family ministries internship at La Cañada Presbyterian Church. Anybody? La Cañada Pres? No? Okay. And I kept volunteering at the church that we were attending locally there. And then I graduated in June of 2010, and in August of 2010, oh look, how come no one said anything? Is it?
Oh, yay!
Boop. Okay. No spinning wheel of death. This is the picture from the camp I was at, the actual time that I had that experience. Can you see me in there? No. If you could zoom in, you'd find me in the middle there, looking rather...
Are you in the hat?
I'm in the hat, yeah. And the guy with the mustache on the right there was my youth pastor named Ed Kelly. Yeah, that's my best friend. No. There's a picture of me being involved as a student leader in our youth group with bleached hair, which is what all the cool kids did. There's a picture of me. These would have fit in my narrative, but I'm telling you. There's a picture of me moving into my dorm room at Seattle Pacific, my freshman year of college. Don't look too closely at that picture. There's lots of... that would be a fun, like, seek and find picture. There's Lexi and I in early days of volunteering at Bethany as youth leaders. We were considered the, how would you describe it? Basically, we were often asked to evaluate coffee mugs, and because we had very particular, still do, very particular things that make what a good coffee mug and a bad coffee mug, and this one was particularly bad. So it got 5 thumbs down. There I am graduating from Fuller, Chap Clark. And then 2010, here we are. This church hired me to be the associate pastor, called me to be the associate pastor for youth and family ministries, and I've been here ever since. Here we are on the left is that's basically when we moved to Murfreesboro. Yeah. So for the past 23 years or so, my attention and focus has been on the pulse of youth ministry in the church and the cultural shifts that have impacted youth ministry over time. Since starting at FPC, I've developed programs and ways of doing things that have been requested by youth pastors and youth ministry organizations all over the country. At my core, I have always been passionate about helping nurture a robust faith in our young people and giving them a solid understanding of the gospel and not only what it is, but what difference it makes in our lives. Coming alongside you all, coming alongside families as you do the real work of raising your kids to know Jesus and to love Jesus and to follow Jesus. When I started in youth ministry, I was 22, no kids, and I had a lot of growing up to do myself, which is a whole nother story. And now it's crazy. I've been doing this for, like I said, almost 25 years. Now I turned 46 in 3 days. Lexi and I have been married for 24 years. Our kids are 17, 15, 12, and 10 today. So I see things as a parent now where for a long, long time, even when I had younger kids, there's no teacher-like experience when it comes to raising teenagers and things. But like all of you as parents, Lexi and I are learning as we go. We don't pretend to have all this figured out. I don't pretend to have all of this figured out. I'll never stop exploring and learning and growing. But I can also say this, and I say this with humility, but also with some pride, that when it comes to ministry to teenagers and their families, I'm an expert. I'm an expert. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have been here this long and to continue living and serving here, which brings us to this topic, pop culture and adolescence. What I'm about to present isn't super long, but it's normally something that I cover with parents and students when the kids are seniors in high school. But I've often thought that it's something that we should probably, it wouldn't hurt to cover earlier, because it does direct a lot of what we do and what we're about. As a side note, and I'll explain, well, as a side note, I'm hoping this winter, Wonderful Wednesday nights, to do a little series for parents going deeper into adolescence and the tightrope the kids are walking between childhood and adulthood. I'm not going that deep with this one, but because of some program changes, I'm actually freed up to do something like that on a Wednesday night for parents, which is really exciting, and I haven't done that Have I ever done a parent thing on a Wednesday night? I don't know.
No,
I don't think so.
Sticky face, but that was a Sunday.
Yeah. So adolescence. What is adolescence? Well, adolescence is the time of life when a young person has the mental capability and the cultural permission to wrestle with three questions. And these are the three questions. This is psychology stuff. This isn't like churchy mumbo jumbo. This is psychology. But adolescence, the process is called individuation, and these are the three questions that they're needing answers to. Who am I? Which is a question of identity. What difference do I make? What difference can I make? Which is a question of purpose or autonomy. And then where do I belong? Which is obviously a question of belonging. In the early days of North America, and still today in some other remote parts of the world, adolescence was a rather brief phase. There were different cultural rituals, rites of passage, family identity, things like that made the initiation into adulthood pretty simple for kids. You go into the woods a child, and you're going to come back into the village a man, that kind of stuff. In those early days, none of these three questions were really more dominant than the other ones, even though a psychologist would have been able to pinpoint answers to each of the three. You understand? None of them were more dominant questions. But we're going to focus, and I want to say a few things about research that's happened here in the United States over the last couple of hundred years. Over the course of the late 19th and early 20th century, society has shifted in ways that have irrevocably altered the dynamics of the initiation process into adulthood for teenagers. Are you with me? Okay. And during this period, over time, adolescence has emerged as a distinct stage of development. It went from being a period of growing individual responsibility and independence to a stage of exploration and discovery and social growth and things like that. And social theorists began to describe adolescence differently by saying it's a stage of differentiation from families of origin and from parents. And I would add, in the church, it's a stage of differentiation often from the faith of the parents. This is actually a big shift to refer to this little time between childhood and adulthood as a time of differentiation from family. That's different, okay? That's a big change. So what was it that did it? Well, there's two main factors in our country that contributed to this initial change. One of them is the Industrial Revolution. Look how hard those kids are working and how happy they are up there working on that thing. The Industrial Revolution was part of it because that displaced young people from the workforce and consequently a connection to a family identity that came via that work. But then also the other big thing that contributed to the change was prolonged education. So it used to be kids didn't have to go to school until they were 16 or 18 years old. Most of them didn't, but there was now, because of prolonged education, a new social sphere for young people to navigate and to have to figure out. So let's talk about that. Around 1940, here in North America, as a result of this change, and this is kind of, I'm giving you I'm putting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse here. Is that the expression? Yes. A youth subculture was established in the United States. We say subculture because subculture is secondary to, anyone? Culture, yeah, popular culture. Popular culture. By around 1940, across the United States, a 14-year-old could no longer have a full-time job, but was required to stay in school until about 16 to 18 years old, like 12th grade, right? For the first time in American history, we had large groups of teenagers stuck together in school for longer than they had been. And as a result, this youth subculture to popular culture blossomed. Teenagers still needed answers to these three big questions that we looked at, questions of identity, purpose, and belonging. But now, because we have this youth culture that was interacting with and being influenced by popular culture, the three questions sort of became more organized, and one of them actually emerged as a more dominant question, a dominant task, right? And over the years, the dominant question has shifted. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So in the first age, we call it, because youth culture was brand new, from the late 40s to the late 60s, the dominant question of adolescence was one of identity. Who am I? So at that time, identity was the lens through which teenagers, for the most part, okay, and I'm speaking in broad terms, okay? Were there exceptions to this? I'm sure. Let's not talk about those. Identity was the lens through which teenagers viewed the world around them. Not only that, but the other two questions, the question of belonging and the question of purpose, were viewed through the lens of identity. What this means is the average teenager in the 50s and 60s was wearing identity goggles and looking at the world around them and saying, who am I? This will tell me what difference I can make, and it will tell me where I belong. You understand? During this period, by the way, and this is connecting to the church, remember that's why we're here. During this period, youth ministry was missional. And we say that because before this, there was no youth ministry, really. Parachurch ministries, Young Life and Youth for Christ, were started at about this time. And they were determined, if you know anything about Young Life or Youth for Christ, they're determined to go where kids are, right? They're going to go to where am I blocking this room? They're going to go to where the students are. Young Life and Youth for Christ functioned missionally. That's why we say that youth ministry was missional. Meeting the teens where they were hanging out in order to build relationships with them and then be able to share the gospel with them. In the 1950s and 60s, the vast majority of churches were not doing this. They were not doing youth ministry at all. They were not attempting to reach their young people. Young people went to church with their families, but there was no real effort from churches to do anything. At the same time, though, 50s and 60s, churches could begin to see their teenagers slipping away. Probably going to Young Life or something, I don't know. Young Life and Youth for Christ, these organizations, saw an opportunity to reach teenagers by going out to them. And what they were doing was experimental, and it was groundbreaking, and it was working pretty well. These organizations let youth culture and the kids of that time just be themselves, right? Did anybody attend Young Life ever growing up? Anyone ever? No. Youth for Christ? Okay. It's really the same now, but just letting kids be themselves. Now going back in time, sitting in a circle talking, singing songs, using their guitars, being willing to use the language of youth culture and things like that. Churches just weren't there yet, okay, in this first age. Then, in the late 60s, there's a massive shift because youth culture had started to get a sense of itself over this short span of time. And just think Vietnam War era, I think this is a good example. Youth culture had taken on an identity of its own. And this identity certainty trickled down to the teenagers that were a part of it. We're here to stay. We have a voice, we have something to say, and what we say matters, and things like this. The question of identity for youth culture had been solved. And so the dominant or leading question, you can see where this is going, the dominant or leading question for youth culture and adolescence moved to purpose, which is the second age, if you will. Purpose or autonomy was the dominant task of adolescence for teenagers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is some of us in the room. So the average teenager in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was wearing purpose goggles and looking at the world and asking, what difference do I make? Do my choices matter? Do I matter? What sort of power do I have? How can I influence other people? How am I different from other people? This will tell me who I am, and it will tell me where I belong. So during this time, churches began to recognize that this monolithic youth culture wasn't going anywhere. It was still a subculture to popular culture. It wasn't going anywhere. And church leaders began to admit that maybe we should do something about all the teenagers who aren't going to our churches anymore, who seem to be slipping away. And so the biggest organization of the time, which most of you probably don't know about, or all of you may not, it's called Youth Specialties, which started in 1969 by a guy named Mike Yaconelli. The whole purpose of Youth Specialties was to bring youth ministry to churches and try to equip churches to be able to do youth ministry, because they had no idea really what to do. The only models for what youth ministry should look like were being provided by Young Life and for Youth for Christ, both of which were still experiencing huge success. So it made sense that most of the churches would just adopt models that looked like Young Life and Youth for Christ, right? If it works for them, it'll work for us. And for the most part, it did, with one key difference. Churches did not use the same missional approach, right? That idea of like going where teenagers are, meeting where they are, going to the schools, going to the football games, churches copied Young Life and Youth for Christ in an attempt for teenagers to come to them, right? You see the difference? And so youth ministry became attraction. So that's in the youth ministry universe, we have this evolution from youth ministry being missional and not really done in the church to being done in the church and shifting to something that's more attractional. Look what we have. Look at our stuff. Look how fancy. And this still works for a lot of churches today. We don't have to raise hands and give examples, but attractional youth ministry can still work. When you've got the numbers, you've got the facilities, you've got the band, you've got the lights, it still works. Attractional youth ministry. Like I said, the logical conclusion that churches made was if it works for them, it'll work for us. And like I said, it did. This whole movement gave rise to the modern church youth group and the youth worker or the youth pastor that we all know today. Churches all over the country use the same approach that the parachurch ministries used. Games, icebreakers, curriculum, songs with guitars, folksy stuff, small groups, things like that. So by the mid-'80s, the Right Youth Ministry program would attack teenagers. Freudian slip. Would attract.
Ooh, good.
By the mid-'80s, the Right Youth Ministry program would attract teenagers like moths to a flame. So much so that a church could simply observe what another church was doing down the street if it was working and copy it, and it would work. They would experience similar success. Throughout this whole time, purpose and autonomy remained the dominant question and the lens through which youth culture and teens saw the world. And this approach worked for a while, but it doesn't work anymore. Why? Well, because in the mid-'90s, there was another massive shift in youth culture, and this time we can blame the baby boomers. It's fun to blame baby boomers, and they get a lot of blame. And you know, boomers were folks who were born between 1946 and 1964. Any boomers in here? No, I'm just kidding. According to scholars and researchers, this cultural shift in America can be blamed in large part to the baby boomer generation because they were the first generation in the history of the United States to not aspire to the benefits of old age. Baby boomers wanted to cling to their youth, hold on to their youth. They didn't aspire to the things that they saw their parents and grandparents enjoying or whatever. They wanted to stay young, okay? So sometime around 2000 now, youth culture, which up until that point had been a monolithic subculture to popular culture, sometime around 2000, youth culture became the dominant culture in America. Youth culture became popular culture. Are you with me? Okay? In America. In other words, and the bonus points, there's a PBS documentary called Merchants of Cool, which is fantastic, and it gets into all this stuff with MTV and everything. Even today, a lot of people, popular culture, takes its cues from youth culture in terms of what music, fashion, language, all these things. Popular culture looks toward youth culture and what the youth are doing in order to find out what direction popular culture ought to be moving. Remember, the dominant question was one of purpose. What difference do I make? Do my choices matter? How can I influence other people? How am I different from others? Part of that task of answering that question of purpose or autonomy on some level is to figure out how you are a unique person. What makes you special, you know? So youth culture did what it had to do around 2000. It fragmented itself from popular culture. So now there is no longer one singular monolithic youth culture. It doesn't exist anymore. It is, this monolithic to which nearly all teenagers belong. Today there's thousands of youth subcultures, okay? One of the things that Yaconelli likes to talk about, Mark Ostreicher, is that because of this, every youth group, even ours, is multicultural. Because it doesn't need to have any racial or ethnic diversity. It's multicultural because of all these thousands of different youth subcultures that exist. And the absence, and I don't know if this is in my notes, but do you understand why the monolithic youth culture would have to fragment and become thousands of other little subcultures? Because if the dominant question is one of autonomy and purpose and uniqueness, and you are popular culture, everybody worships at the feet of youth culture, then that becomes, youth culture cannot abide. And so to survive, it fragments, right? The absence of a larger singular youth culture led to more intense questions of belonging now among adolescents because there's all these subcultures. So today, now we're getting to it, belonging is the lens through which teenagers view the world around them and the questions of identity and purpose. And so the average teenager today is wearing belonging goggles, looking at the world and saying, where do I belong? That will tell me who I am. That will tell me what difference I can make. Why is this important for the church? Why is this important for us? Well, teenagers are looking to belong first. And I think some of you may have heard me talk like this before. Unfortunately, belonging can often be confused for its counterfeit, which is fitting in. Right? And teenagers will go to great lengths, even sacrificing their better judgment to fit in somewhere. But we know, because we're adults, fitting in and belonging are two completely different things. In terms of youth ministry, gone are the strategies that worked so well in the age of autonomy in the 80s, in the 90s. At that time, all you had to do was reach the popular kids, the quarterback of the football team, the captain of the cheerleading squad or whatever. If you could reach them and get them to come, the others would follow in droves, right? If we succeeded in reaching the popular kids in the 80s and 90s, the effect would trickle down through the rest of the school's social networks. And today, you guys know because you have kids this age, school social networks function autonomously. And each one sort of has its own popular kids. And that's not to say that there aren't kind of more popular kids in school and things like that, but things don't make sense anymore. You could have the high school captain quarterback in the chess club, and is actually, there's a kid on the chess club who's more popular because he's better at chess. Or all these rules get bent now, and it's not what it used to be. It used to be that in order to belong somewhere or to a certain group, you had to believe like everyone else in that group. You had to act like everybody else in that group, and then you could belong in that group. But young people today just aren't buying that. They don't buy it. And they're willing to not behave like a certain group. They're willing to not believe what a certain group says right out of the gate. They're a little more careful about it. Research continues to show that teenagers want to experience or feel a sense of belonging first. Once they've got belonging, then they'll try out behaviors, then they'll try out purpose, behaviors leading to purpose, and then they'll consider the beliefs and things that can help lead to the identity behind the beliefs. We often say things like, man, being a teenager today is so different than when I was a teenager, right? That's a common refrain, and it's true. This is what we've just covered is part of the reason why this is true. It also helps us understand why some people, especially some of our older friends, don't seem to understand teenagers today. And it's why they might look down on teenagers today or judge them rather harshly. It's not just smartphones and social media and the internet that has made being a teenager different. Most adults have no idea about the cultural shifts that have happened in the United States and the impact that those have had on the tasks of adolescence and on these dominant questions. So now, youth ministry, which has gone from missional to attractional, now we talk about youth ministry being contextual. Contextual. Youth ministry, to be successful, always has to be contextualized to its particular place, its particular culture. And because everything is being driven by this question of belonging, it's important to me, and it's important to our leaders and our program, that any kid who comes through our doors experiences unconditional love and belonging first, before they say anything about what they believe, before they make any confession about what they believe, before we start grilling them on their behavior and what they do and what they don't do. None of that is as important as giving them a place to belong and a feeling of belonging. The great youth pastors in the ages of identity and autonomy needed to be good party planners. They needed to be good communicators, and it was bonus if you could play guitar. Like you were great if you could do those three things. But the qualities of good youth workers have evolved to match the challenge that these different dominant questions have presented. I can plan a party, okay? I can communicate well. I can even play the guitar. But there's more that I need to be doing. I need to leave collaborative discernment, which we'll get to in a second with the VAST. But good youth leaders today lead collaborative discernment, together figuring out what direction we go, together figuring out what we need to be doing that makes sense for our context, for our place. Our ministry needs to be responsive and is responsive to this context right here. I don't care what First Baptist is doing. I don't care what works at New Vision, because that's not our context. That doesn't help me, you know? And people hardly ever say to me, like, well, you should really try what New Vision does. I mean, what they do seems to be working. In y'all's defense, I've never heard anything like that. But it's important for you to know that what we do is so rooted in how we're interpreting our context here and our church's history and what makes us unique. We want all of our students to know that they belong in a community of people who are trying to love and follow and trust and serve Jesus. That's what we want them to know. And that they're welcome in that community just as they are, right? True belonging, I've got this on the wall downstairs, Brene Brown, one of my favorite Brene Brown quotes ever. True belonging doesn't require that you change who you are. That's fitting in, right? True belonging requires that you be who you are. Be who you are. So that's what we're all about. Does anyone have any questions or anything about what we've covered before we launch into goals, how this connects to our goals? We're leaving the topic of pop culture and adolescence. Okay. When we changed confirmation to a longer process, it started in 8th grade and goes through 11th grade, the goal of confirmation really became the goal of our youth ministry. And that is that students would claim the Christian faith for themselves and be able to articulate their faith with clarity and with confidence. I could really get into the weeds on the words here, but that's it in a nutshell. The goal of our ministry is that by the time kids leave high school here and go on to what's next, that they can claim some form of the Christian faith for themselves, that they've claimed it. Like, this is mine, this is how I talk about it. This is what I believe. This is what I've experienced to be true. That's the goal. So what that means is there's no one size fits all for this. There's no mold that we're trying to get our kids to fit into while they're here. We want to make sure that our kids know that Jesus' table is large and there's room for everyone. And there's room for different ways of expressing what you are coming to believe to be true about who God is and what life is all about. Which means there's room for questions. There's room for doubts. There's room for all of those things. There's room for different ways of understanding things. There has to be. But that's not to say there is no truth, right? We believe in truth. There is truth. We want our students to be familiar with the Bible. We want our students to know the gospel, like I said, and what difference the gospel makes in their lives, and what difference the gospel makes in our lives as a community. I want them to begin to see Christ in all things. You know, that might be the goal of youth ministry, but it's not that, but that could be good, to see Christ in all things. And we want to set our teenagers up for a lifelong journey of faith, which you all know has ups and downs, and it takes crazy turns, and it leads to places we never expect. Some good, some not so good. All of that is okay, and they need to know that that's okay. We want them to know who they are, that question of identity, which for us is rooted in our identity as children of God. Spoiler alert, we have theological answers to all three of these questions, which is why the church has gotten involved in ministry to kids. We want them to know the question of autonomy and purpose, that their choices matter, that they matter. We want them to know where they belong, that no matter where they are, that they belong in community, in a community of people that needs their gifts as much as they need the gifts of others, people who are trying to know Jesus and follow Jesus. That's the goal. Everybody good on that? So how do we do it? Well, there's lots of ways that we do it. We create warm, safe environments. Warm and safe environments. Whenever we gather together as a youth group, whether it's for Sunday school or youth group, or a retreat or a trip or a pool party, it is our intention that the environments that we create are always relationally warm and emotionally safe. Sometimes they're cool. You know, high schoolers are a lot more concerned about environments being cool. Middle schoolers don't care, which is part of the reason why middle schoolers are better. But we do want them to be cool. But more importantly, relationally warm and emotionally safe. This is important. There's not going to be any experience of belonging if kids feel like the environment is cold and unsafe. We do it through education. I like to talk a lot about two ways of knowing. The head and the heart. This is confirmation stuff that some of you may have heard. The head and the heart. Intellectual knowing and experiential knowing. These really are important as we journey through life. But the reality is there are things that our teenagers need to learn intellectually. And so part of how we do it is education. Christian education is an important part of what we do. We do it through worship. Now, we took a break from this for several years. Justin Hoffman, who used to be our worship director, left, went to Chattanooga, and then COVID, and I just haven't brought the guitar out in years downstairs. But not anymore. So we're bringing worship back. Worship is important at youth group because it's an opportunity for students to practice singing, practice worshiping together. Not like choir practice, but it's a good practice for worship. It's a good way for us to practice or to experience the idea that worship makes God happy and that God can actually use our worship to change us from the inside out. Worship is really important. And so that's part of how we do what we do. And then meaningful shared experiences, AKA programs. This is how we can begin to make connections between the head and the heart. Every program, and when I say program, I mean anything we're doing. Sunday school, youth group events, confirmation, anything. Every program is an opportunity for us to find Jesus and to participate somehow in God's mission in the world. Behind the scenes, and I don't want you all to fall asleep, but I will tell you that behind the scenes, there are 4 levels of programming in what we're doing. So for example, entry-level programs, Sunday Night Youth Group is an entry-level program. What that means is that the goal there is not to pressure anyone to do anything. The goal is to increase interest in the deeper levels of programming, really. But the message is Jesus. It's friendly, it's welcoming, it's warm, it's safe. Entry level. You can bring your friend anytime, no big deal. Just discipleship level program is one deeper. Then there's a level I call real relationships, and there's a level I call adoption guide, which may sound crazy, but if you want more information about that, I'll give it to you. I just don't want to lose you all. Point is, there's different levels to these programs, very intentionally, with different goals in mind. But this is how we do what we do. Any questions about the goals or tactics? Great. This is going to go quick, you guys. Don't ask questions. Let's look at our leadership. The VAST, for those of you who don't know, the VAST, and I had to scour the internet for some of these pictures. Let me tell you, Jay Smith is a hard one to find online, buddy. The VAST is a ministry team of the church session and a very important part of our church leadership. Bobby Harding, Jan Lance, Patsy Coleman, Katie Peachy, Ann Mays, Emily Hunton, Bill Brash, and Jay Smith are all members of the VAST. One of my jobs is to lead our volunteers as they implement our ministry programs and build relationships with our teenagers. I and our volunteers implement the decisions that come out of the VAST. I and the volunteers don't make the decisions, really. I help make decisions in the VAST, but that's where the decisions are made. Members of this ministry team, the VAST, agree to be attentive to the Holy Spirit and the Spirit's leading in what we're doing. They help shape the vision of what we're doing, the direction we're going in, and frankly, they're like my care team. Like, they care for me and they support me when I'm losing my mind, which is more often than you probably realize. Any of these folks, by the way, can be a great point of contact for you if you have questions about what's going on, feedback about anything that's happening, concerns about anything. I, of course, am happy to be the person you contact, but these are also people who you can contact. That's the VAST. And then there's volunteer leaders who are the true saints and angels, in my opinion. They give a ton of their time and their energy to our kids, and they care deeply about our kids. As of now, the volunteers we have for our high school ministry on Sunday nights, which includes 8th graders, which we'll get to if you haven't heard, are me, Marilyn Patterson, Shelby Hunton, Alex Wallahan, hello, pretty excited about that, and Nick Mays. Wednesday nights, which will be open cellar, and then also middle school event stuff, our main volunteers are Bruce Bailey and Sarah Kong. The two most important criteria for being a volunteer leader are the two questions I ask. Do you love Jesus? And do you love kids? If a person doesn't love Jesus or doesn't love kids, then they're probably not the best fit for direct ministry with teenagers, at least not here. So those are the two leading questions. All of our volunteers, including our confirmation mentors, complete background checks and all that good stuff. And in addition to loving Jesus and loving to spend time with kids, it's important to me that our volunteer leaders understand the task of adolescence, kind of some of the stuff that we've talked about, understand the importance of incarnational ministry, which is the idea of being like embodying Christ when we're with our kids, with the students, mindful of our ministry goals and how we fit into them. They're committed to building relationships with our students and modeling the Christian faith and paying attention to what's going on, especially paying attention to the kids who seem like they're on the fringes of our group. Ensure that everybody feels safe and included. And then finally, and this is very exciting, we have a new addition to our leadership, which is a part-time staff person, our family ministries coordinator, who is Angela Rogers, who's sitting right over here. So Angela, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
My name's Angela Rogers. I grew up in Nashville, graduated high school, Nashville Christian, went to college at Tennessee Tech, majored in psychology. After college, I worked at Wilson County Youth Ranch with at-risk youth for quite a bit of time. And then after that, I was a hospital liaison for Centerstone, which is a mental health facility in Nashville. We moved to Murfreesboro. Me and my husband got married, and I have two kids, Austin and Samantha. He's 16 16 to 12. I was a stay-at-home mom up until last August when I started substitute teaching and part-time in this office and then part-time here. My kids went to good school, and I know some of you are familiar faces. Some of you I'm looking forward to get to know. And if you have any questions, just you know where to find me once he gives you all that information.
Yes, thank you. Y'all know we've never had anybody like this as part of the team. So I'm very excited. We're learning as we go, Angela and I, on how this is going to work. But she's going to be helping with a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I've been doing by myself all this time, and taking a lot off my plate, which is wonderful. Up until now, without anybody really taking this stuff off my plate, there have been things that have been sacrificed as a result of that. Because of Angela, I will be available to spend more time with our teenagers and families outside of church programs. I'll be able to give more time and energy to preparing worship and youth group talks and series and like these things on Wednesday nights, on retreats and all that. This is all very good, and frankly will allow me to better serve as pastor of youth and family ministry, as opposed to doing some of that nitty-gritty administrative stuff too. So I'm really excited about it. Yes. So you are going to start getting texts and emails from Angela about events and things. She'll be the one communicating to you about what's coming up. She'll be the one asking for RSVPs and hassling you whether or not you're coming or not, or we can expect to see your kids. She'll be the one coming after you for money, for things that need to be paid for, and all those good things. Her cell, we say her cell is TBD because we're going to create a project broadcast account, which for those of you who don't know, that's one of the tools that I use to communicate with you guys. We're going to create one for her. So you'll get a text probably pretty soon, within a week or so, that says, hey, it's Angela, save my number. And there you go. So that's why I said her cell is TBD. Any questions about the VAS, the volunteers, or Family Ministries Coordinator Angela? Okay. Before we look at the year ahead, we're going to spend a little time looking at expectations. This is what we expect from the students and what we expect from all of you as parents. We're doing okay on time. Like normal, I'm talking more than I planned. In order for us to achieve our ministry goals, it is absolutely critical that the students know what we as leaders expect of them, and also what they should be able to expect from their peers whenever they're at one of our programs. Part of our work as leaders is to make sure that all the students feel safe and included, and that they're free to be themselves, but also that every student's able to have fun and to spiritually engage with whatever it is that we're doing, no matter what we're doing. When we're together, and sometimes it's more prevalent than others, like if we're in Nashville Shores, it may be a little bit different than if we're having a Bible study discussion in the cellar on Sunday night. But I will say that no matter what we're doing, when we're together as a youth group, we have a zero tolerance policy for any lack of respect or unkindness. And we have this code of conduct, which I know you're familiar with. It's been there all year downstairs. The code of conduct is about behavior, but the driving force behind it is discipleship. The driving force behind it is not behavior, it's discipleship. In a classroom, you have a code of conduct and a they call that like star chart, or you put when I was a kid, you had to put a colored card in the thing. And I put lots of the bad colors in there. That was about behavior, and only behavior, because the teacher had a job to do. For us, the code of conduct is about discipleship. In wanting to help nurture the students in their walk with Jesus. That's why the code of conduct exists. I say all the time, the evidence of a life being led by the Holy Spirit is not in the sin we avoid, it's in the fruit we produce, right? Being a good Christian is not about how good you are at following rules. It's about remembering that we are perfectly loved and accepted just as we are, and then reflecting that love and acceptance to ourselves and to the people that are around us. Those are very important. This is the reason we get together. This is the reason our church and our youth group exist in the first place. We want all of our students to grow in their spiritual maturity and understand that time together as a youth group is time that we spend in God's presence, even when we're at Nashville Shores. So we want our students to show care for themselves and for one another on a heart level. Our work, my work as the pastor, the youth pastor, and our work as volunteers, and our work as parents, is to bring each young person to the feet of Christ, really. And that is very important and sacred work. And so we want to protect, and the students have heard this spiel before, and they'll hear it again Sunday when we have our first youth group. We want to protect and honor the time that we share together, which is why in our attempts to be attentive to the Spirit and to make sure that students have room to learn whatever it is that God is teaching them, we've got this code of conduct, which is downstairs, which hasn't changed. This is what's on it. Every single student is expected to treat everyone with courtesy and respect. Every student is expected to listen and allow others to speak without interruption. Every student is expected to refrain from offensive language and jokes. Every student is expected to foster a welcoming and inclusive environment for all. And every student is expected to stay engaged and actively participate in the conversation or the activity. Which means I don't let students go like this when we're having a discussion, not on their phone. That's the best example. That may be the hardest rule to enforce, by the way, is the staying engaged and actively participating. Because you never know if they're really actively engaged, if they're sitting quietly. But those are the expectations that are on the code of conduct. And this is also on the code of conduct. When there's a problem, or when a student is not living up to those expectations, the first warning they get is just to stop. And I've given out 2,000 of these warnings to just about every single one of your kids. Stop. Stop. That's the first time. The second, if they persist or if there's another problem, the second one says, see you next week. And on my conduct board downstairs, there's the peace emoji. Like, peace out. We'll see you next week. If it's a Sunday morning, we'll send them to find you. If it's a Sunday night, I may call you to come get them. If it's a retreat, God forbid, you'd have to drive to North Carolina to get your kid from a ski trip. Hasn't happened before, but that's after the second one. If a kid is sent home twice, if we have to send somebody out of youth group twice, then we're taking a break from ministry programs for a minute. At that point, and I'll contact parents. If your kid gets sent home, see you next week. You'll hear from me, and we'll talk about what happened and why we took action we did. But if our student is asked to take a break from programs for a while, we will meet. You and I, your parents and I will meet, and we'll work on an action plan. We'll be very intentional about it. My goals don't change for any of the kids. So the worst case scenario for me would be to lose a family that just wants to leave because they're sick of this or something. I care so deeply about all of the kids and all of the families. If this happens and I send somebody home, hey man, you're taking a break for a couple weeks or a couple months, we're digging in deeper. So there's so much hope in the code of conduct. It may seem strong, the action plan here, but the reality is that our group is small. We don't have time to constantly be battling disruptive or disrespectful behavior. And the last thing that I want is for other students to feel uncomfortable. Remember, the first way that we're able to do what we do is by creating warm, safe environments. So that's what these are about. Let me add that I and the rest of the volunteers don't see and hear everything all the time that goes on. And sometimes something is said or happens that I'm unaware of. I have no idea that something is said or something has happened. And it's important, and the students know this, but I'm telling you, if a student is ever made uncomfortable because something that is said or something that's done by another student, we need to know about it right away. Tell one of the leaders, make sure your kids tell a leader, get it to me, because we can handle things much more effectively in the moment, right then and there, than if they're given time to percolate or stew or I don't even know what. What's the word for something that becomes disfigured over time? There's got to be a word for it. Fester. That's the one I was looking for. Yeah. Any questions about student expectations? Okay, here we are. We're almost done. Parent expectations. Our work is to complement the work that you're already doing at home. We aim to come alongside parents as you do the work of raising your kids in the faith and to make good choices. So you have some expectations too. We've never outlined these explicitly to you all. So this is very exciting. What do we expect of you? One is to understand our limits, understand my limits and the limits of this program. This is not a dry cleaner ministry. What I mean is you can't expect to drop off your kids dirty and wrinkled and expect to pick them up clean and pressed in 2 hours. That's not what we do. It's not, if I could do that, there'd be 7 million kids in this youth group and I'd be on Oprah or something. That's just not what it is. We will pour love and pour grace and pour kindness into the students' lives, but only the Holy Spirit changes us from the inside out, which to people who work in the church is a great relief. It's not up to me. We want to cooperate in that work. I want to make myself available to participate in that work, but it's important that you understand the limits of what we're capable of doing. The second one is to model what you want. This is Parent 101. Model what you want. When it comes to kids, have you ever heard the expression, parents get what they are, right? Have you heard that before? I may be butchering it a little bit. Have you heard that?
Like you're raising?
Yeah. What's important to us has a better chance of becoming something that's important to our kids. So, in terms of church stuff, continue to make it a priority to attend worship together as a family. If we want our kids to attend Sunday school, then we probably need to be attending Sunday school. If we want our kids to live lives of love and service toward others, then we probably need to be modeling lives of love and service toward other people. We aren't gonna, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So it probably fits into this whole thing. We need to be modeling what we want for our kids. So that's the other expectation. Don't expect your kid to want anything or to participate in anything that they don't believe that you think is actually important. They won't. And by the time a kid gets to be a sophomore or junior in high school, it's too late. I've had so many conversations with parents who said, we really want our kid to start coming to youth group. They're a junior. And what I don't say, but I want to say is, it's not happening. I mean, I don't know how, that is almost impossible. It's too late. Youth group has never been important to you, and now it's important. But now the kid is 17, and they're ready to move, all your kids are plugged in, getting plugged in, or are in the early stages, so I'm not worried. But that's what I mean by model what you want. Trust the leadership. Nothing that we do is thoughtless or careless. Every decision we make is made collaboratively. It's not a unilateral dictatorship, as much as I'd like for it to be one. The choices we make and the things that we plan, all of it is with the intention of doing what we feel like is best for your kids and for you as families, okay? And for the student's relationship with Jesus. And your trust in that means a lot. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions. Of course, ask questions. But also that trust means a lot. Participation. You're all here today, so you've all proven that you're willing to participate. And I'm very grateful for that. I know, like I said, I know all of you. I know all of your kids. I'm so thankful for your commitment to this place and to this ministry. But we expect you to continue to encourage your kids to participate in what we're doing. If that becomes a challenge for you, come talk to me. I have gotten okay at talking with teenagers over the years, and I might have some ways that I can help connect with your kiddo in ways that might be able to get them involved. Help the confirmation mentors, which is hard work to be a confirmation mentor, but help them as they hopefully are making attempts to reach out to your kids and spend time with them. Be a helper on those ends as well. And every once in a while, I might even need your help as volunteers. So you never know. So we expect you to participate. Pay attention. That's the other one. We really try not to send too many emails or texts. I try not to. Angela's going to try not to. We all know what it's like to get too many texts and too many emails. I'll be honest, I don't read email. Just full disclosure, this web school sends probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 emails a week. I don't read any of them. I mean, I read maybe the newsletter. I just don't. So, and I guarantee I'm not the only one. That's why I don't send you a lot of emails. If I send an email to you, please look at it. Because I know how agonizing it is to receive them, but I'm only sending it because I think it's really something that you need to see. Often I'll send a text that says, I emailed you. Would you please look at the email? Because I didn't want to put this all in text. But do pay attention to what we send. And then finally, report. If you ever have a question or a concern or feedback, please contact me directly. It's not unusual for me to learn things about someone or a family from a different family who learned it from a different family, and I'm finding out that I'm the last person to know about this thing that's happened or this question that somebody has. That's not okay with me, and it's not how I like it to go. Is it a fact of life? I don't know. But if you have a concern, if you have a question, if you have a problem, come talk to me. I'm happy when people do that, which they do. Let me remind you that I am here not only to serve the teenagers, but to serve you as parents. I can't effectively minister to the teens without also ministering to you as their parents. Parents are included in this ministry. So please, I didn't know what else to call it. Report, be in touch, stay in contact, all that stuff. Any questions about parent expectations? We're so close. Okay, we're going to take about a 35,000 flyover of the year ahead, 35,000 feet. Sunday night youth group from 6 to 8 p.m. is for 8th graders through high school kids. Did everybody read the email about why 8th graders moved up? Okay, does anybody need the explanation? Is anyone willing to raise their hand now that nobody's raising? Did you raise your hand?
I did not. I know why.
You know why?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I will say, I thought Bethany. Since we will have younger kids, and our high school youth group is pretty big. Last year we'd have like 25 kids every Sunday night, and it didn't get any smaller with the rising 9th graders. So with the 8th graders, I'm expecting 30-ish on a Sunday night. We are going to be keenly aware of how we have younger kids in there with high school kids, 8th graders. That's different, and it may not seem like much, but it is a little much. It's a little different. And I just want you to know that we're going to be mindful of that we have younger students in there. Part of our discussion involves breaking into small groups and talking about it. Those 8th graders will hang together for those discussions. And our leaders will be especially aware to make sure that it's fun and safe for everybody, including the 8th graders. 8th graders will not be able to attend the ski trip. They can't attend the camping trip, things like that, but they can come to youth group on Sunday night. Next year, we'll have other things to figure out. We'll worry about that later. Because we have no 7th graders right now. So what do you do next year when there's no 8th graders in a rising Pacific? I don't even know. Let's not worry about that. Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock, we're calling it Open Cellar. I'll be down there, Bruce will be down there, Sarah will be down there, snacks will be out, kids can work on homework, we can play Xbox, we can play ping pong, we can play pool, we can talk, we can play games, but there's not going to be any formal like Bible study discussion on Wednesday nights. It's just hang out, which I'm pretty excited about. And because of this Open Cellar thing, I'll be able to hopefully do some classes this year for parents and things. There's always Sunday school. I captured this image with my Blink camera, which is always watching. But that's Sunday school, donuts. Believe it or not, Sunday school is actually the 3rd level of programming in my mind. So just so you know, deeper level programming, building relationships, sharing our lives with one another, making connections between what we're learning intellectually and what we're experiencing day to day, reading the Bible. This all happens in Sunday school. We're almost done. And of course, there's monthly middle school events, high school retreats, combined events, summer trips and events. Monthly middle school events will include 6th graders this year, for those of you who have 6th graders. And look for an email from Angela soon with a summary of events for the year for your grade. So if you have a student in 9th grade, you're going to get everything the 9th grader needs to know for this year. For those of you who like to put calendar stuff in, you can put it in. Any questions? last questions?
Well, I will. We're new for the 8th graders moving, so Sunday nights we just drop them off here.
Yeah, the glass doors over here are unlocked.
Cool.
You pull, everybody pulls in this way. Kids come in and exit right through here.
Cool.
Any other questions? If you had kids downstairs after I close in prayer, would you go down there to retrieve them? And also, if you see trash on the floor, pick it up and put it in the trash can? I don't know what the room looks like. Marilyn Patterson has been down there alone with all these kids. Well, not alone. The Jackson girls. There's others. I told some of the older kids to help out. Any final questions? Thank you so much for your time today.